Hi everybody, it's Tommy here, and I'm going to do another show, and this time it's on the world and its wars. What we're going to do in this particular show is try and get through different timelines, and we'll try and go over a couple of thousand years. I'll do my best to off the top of my head, but certainly the whole principle of it is to try and give you, or let you leave you with an example or an idea or understanding of why we're in such a state of affairs when it comes to violence against each other in the world. And I'll try and kind of do that in this show by illustrating that this has happened over time on the perennial kind of cycle, and we haven't really changed much as a civilization, despite the different kind of genres of civilizations that's actually implemented themselves to some degree and kind of flourished and demised through the timelines of even a couple of thousand years. We can go far back, maybe as the Romans. We can go back that far back, like Athens as well, like kind of Athenian type stuff. But I'm not a dab hand in this particular kind of history part I'm about to mention here. But I'd like to kind of look at maybe the Aztecs a wee bit, just in general, and just kind of, just point out their kind of like way of living, which was they built temples, kind of like stepping stone type pyramids. Yeah, that kind of like something you make out of Lego, I suppose, in the modern age. they built the pyramids out of Lego, which is not the best way to say it. And at the top of it, they would have their place where they could pray or do sacrifices or that sort of thing. But the whole principle was to get closer to the sky, because that's where the gods were. And therefore there was a higher being or a higher beings, if you like, that were looking over them, and sun gods, rain gods, whatever it may be. And they would always think they had to do a particular activity to please those particular gods. And if you keep that in mind now, and let's jump over to the Egyptians who built the pyramids. And remember, they were quite an advanced civilization. Just like the Aztecs were quite advanced, because they were able to construct things without machinery, like buildings and carve, and all these skills. I mean, a lot of people can't do these in the present modern world, in modernity. So I mean, these guys and these girls, if you like, pretty much had all these skills to actually take the Earth's resources and make them into some sort of man-made product on vast scales. And the Egyptian pyramids are an example of that. All mixed around religion, God, that sort of thing, beliefs. And the Egyptians put their dead in sarcophagus, I can never say that word, into the tombs and the chambers of the pyramids. They had their shafts so they could see out. There was like shafts cut into the pyramids so they'd be able to see like the Orion network and so on, the stars. And that was a few thousand years ago, and obviously the Earth has kind of tilted since then and shifted, and the solar system's a different position because of the expansion of space, and therefore like these things don't align up like they used to, because the horizon, the stargazing and so on, the Milky Way has all moved different kind of positions. However, we do know that that's what these pyramids were kind of there for, and they kind of try to make them in the kind of Orion belt type kind of formula or shape, with the kind of 4 stars at the corner with other pyramids. So the Egyptians had the technology and understanding of that. And then we could jump into now. Why don't we jump into the hippie movement, where people believed in peace and all the rest of it, and wanted a better kind of modern world, because they've saw 2 world wars and they don't want that anymore. They want things to be really cool, and people are kind of got a stage where they're spaced out in some respects, and they opened their mind up. And you have musicians like maybe Jimi Hendrix, and you have other people, the Beatles and that, coming through, who are a bit more clean cut to a degree. And all these people coming through the music world and the arts world, like Andy Warhol and so on, all bringing a different dimension to our civilization, all with a belief that this would change it. This would change the whole way it is. And you have even, and just the final part on that particular 60s part, 70s part, is John Lennon. Give peace a chance, his song, and war is over, and so on and so on. So you have all these kind of different pop-ups, I would call them, in different civilizations that correspond to the beliefs of the time. And you know that they could do it. We do with like power and influence, I would say, because the people who built the Aztec kind of pyramids were looking for some sort of influence on the gods, so that then they would have a decent life. The people who were in Egypt get put into the Egyptian tombs and so on. They had power, and their power meant that even when they were dead, these things were rolled out, you know, and almost there's flashes out of this day when people die, they have wills and various kind of instructions to the people who are still alive and what way they'd like to be laid to rest. And the Egyptians I would say brought some sort of formula to that, and then the Victorians obviously kind of captured it in the modern kind of modernity state as we have now. So you have these particular flashes that I'm just mentioning of things, and I'm got my point to all this in general and wholeness as well is that I'd like to say that perception on this is really the belief. So belief becomes the first part of the perception. Okay, so if you capture that now and you take the belief part of it, which is your first perception, then it means that you have a rigid mindset. Until your belief has changed, you have a rigid mindset into believing that is a way to do things. And the examples I've given are very kind of constructive in the modernity kind of way of doing things, because influence modernity, and even the 60s has influenced modernity, because 50 years ago you had this kind of whole movement, and then 50 years later you have flashes of it still here, but you have the influences of it through you know, the music still influences everyday life here. The people who talk then, still, some of them are still alive and they still influence things. Their culture comes through, and maybe like the UK we have minis still, which are now a different shape, the mini car. You have mini skirts, you know, and so on. A lot of minis there, but you know, you have a lot of things came from the 60s. Rock and roll as well, maybe kind of just tipped to the edge of that into the kind of flower power age. So there's different influences there, but it certainly perpetuates the kind of perennial line that we have now, which maintains the civilization that we have now. Just that we change that civilization into a more macro constructive, which is based around all these past experiences. Now, the thing here we're trying to say is perception is the belief is the first perception. Therefore, if you're believing things be a certain way, you're happy to then stick with your guns, to say that wee term with the Wild Western, stick with your guns and so on. So you're happy to stick with your guns in some way that you're going to make sure that way of working is maintained. Now let's apply all of this to the present kind of war situations in Iraq, which is just kind of flared up in the last what we've got, maybe like 2 months, 3 months now. I've lost track of the kind of time scale. It seems to be so common on the news, and pretty much you've got this group ISIS, which is a unusual kind of development in that particular area, because we thought we'd get rid of the Al Qaeda people, which we haven't, but we thought we'd get rid of them, most of them, really, most of them, and we thought as well that we diluted them and weakened them when Bin Laden and all these people were kind of took out the game, to say the least, and there seemed to be some sort of joy and closure for a cathartic point of view for a lot of people who were kind of like the other end of the kind of ideology of those extremists, you know, like the people who were victims in different atrocities. So there seemed to be some sort of cathartic release there, which kind of gave them closure in some respects to some of it. And now you have, this new movement moving in, who seem to be kind of filling that void. Remember in past shows we talked about the void? The void is there still, and it always needs filled. You know, and we have this new movement. Now remember, the economic crisis is now coming to an end. America had started to recover a long time ago, and closer. And America started recovering a long time ago, even though some of their people were still a bit kind of, you know, poor and people are hungry and so on. That in their mind, and it would be like kind of the inferior type part of the kind of capitalist model, which means that the inferior part don't always kind of do as well as the superior part, which are a great getting all the kind of surplus in capital and so on, and labour and that, and they're able to kind of maintain themselves in a more better dynamics. So America has recovered, and it's recovered to probably a decent level, you know, considering. It's still not a level though where they can actually go into a war. Right, so let's bring war out of the conversation in a second. Britain's starting to recover. There is some sort of movement with that, and therefore I would say that void that had the economic crisis is now starting to empty of different fragments of that. Despite the UK being in a position where it still is paying off a couple of trillion debt, it's still in a position where it knows it can clear it by 2018. based on the way the pension stuff that they just got announced a few months ago. They can actually take a good bit from people's pensions because they're opening the fund up. So, and there's also the housing market with deposits and stuff like that getting put down with government. So there's all these things in place that are now taking this economic crisis out of this void, and in that void you need something else. Now, if you notice, the kind of pattern here would be that the void is full of economics now, but before that it was war and terror. Now we're coming back to this kind of war situation again. You also had, we were talking one of the other shows about the 100-year anniversary of the First World War, which, by the way, there was a ceremony in Glasgow Cathedral not far from me, with Prince Charles, David Cameron, all these sort of people, Alex Samnat, we're all at that pretty much that ceremony to kind of remember the people who died in that war and so on. And it's a very military cathedral that when you go to it. If you ever go to Glasgow Cathedral, you'll see what I mean. But on the war part of it, it seems that this war section is now starting to go into that void at the moment anyway. Now, I think what's happened though on this occasion is that before there was conspiracy and controversy on the Iraq war, don't go into war and so on, and they didn't have to. They actually didn't have to, because even though these people maybe in the power in these countries were some sort of threat, they were always maintainable, kept at arm's length, and kind of like, you kind of humour them to a certain degree, like they done with Gaddafi and so on. But what seems to have happened in that Middle East is after the Arab Spring, you seem to have some sort of like movement of people all starting to get that cathartic release in themselves. And that cathartic release has now led to people finding their identity. Now, we could talk about identity all day in a way, because I know loads about it, but the bottom line I would say here is that people have been suppressed, suppressed is probably the best way to put it, for so many years that they kept their identity secret. And you've got flashes here of when the Christians started to kind of become Christians thousands of years ago, they had to maybe keep it more of a secret, or the Romans would get them and so on, And then what happened was, all the empires and that were different religions, but the Christian religion started to come through. It's a very strong religion now. You've got flashes as well of maybe like reformations that happened in Britain, people who would take part in wars, civil wars and so on, or try to overthrow kings and queens through the years in different countries like France and so on, all would have their underground movements before they actually became public. And that seems to have kind of occurred in these Iraqi countries and Afghanistan. That there's people there with different beliefs. Now, remember, belief now is a perception. Different beliefs on what they think civilization should be. Now, if we take the Aztecs and the Egyptians and we take the wee hippie people and all the rest of it, they had a belief what they thought the world should be like, and they interacted with the world in that ideological way where they were able to they were able to kind of put themselves in a position where they found rationalisation for the actions they were taking, based on their belief system, which was perpetuated by their world's environment. Right, and their world could have been only a wee small wood, or it could be a large forest or a mountain and stuff. It could be anything, but their world was their world that they lived in, and their perceptions were their perceptions drawn to then form beliefs, which then became perceptions in themselves. And you have the same situation with the ISIS people. These people are what they call radicalised, I believe. It's probably the best word to say it. They're radicalised to thinking that the powers that be, the Western kind of ideologies and so on, are not the way to be, and there should be a better kind of way of doing things. That's kind of seems to be the gist there. And you have that altruistic suicide type element to it there from kind of Durkheim, was it? Where he done his suicide kind of stuff. And what that says is that these people want to die for what they believe in. And it's very, very toxic, that, and very, for a stable Western world, and we are stable, even though we have economic crises and all that, there is a standard of living here, and that's why people try and come into our country, and people also raise families here, when people maybe come and bring skills here from other countries, like doctors, nurses, teachers and so on. They raise families here and live here all the rest of their lives, and intergenerationally that family will grow over the generations. It's a cracking country. America's a cracking country. You have Australia and all these places. These are all very, very well developed countries. They have their social problems, they have issues with poverty, but they don't have war-torn civil stance in their particular frames of reference, really, a frame of work, because even though you have an independence referendum right now coming up in a few weeks, it's a peaceful way of doing things. There's no animosity, there's no's and yeses going about, and people are saying yes and no to whatever they're saying yes and no to. But overall, it's a bureaucratic country that has peace in its mind, and it's not a violent country, even though we have a mix of violence in it with crime and so on. It's actually getting lower, the crime in this country. So we in these countries are actually living an okay standard of life. But there is people out there who think we don't like the way that is. We don't like the West because they take all our oil, whatever it may be, which isn't really the case. There is economic suicides happen where countries in the past, they'll remain nameless, just for the sake of privacy, countries in the past go into other countries that have resources and then maybe build a few roads and schools and help the infrastructure, and in return they take some oil when that country can't pay back the debt that's kind of owed to the Western countries. That has happened in the past, but see, wee things like that are actually fueling the minds of people who are in ISIS and so on, because you have Westerners now starting to move their belief system towards that type of ideology, where the West has got too much and they're this and they're that and the next thing, and this is what's fueling that movement. And you have this First World War anniversary with the sleeping plans, as I said before, people marching across towards Belgium and so on for the Germany, and you've got similar things happening with these IS people, because what they're doing is they're beginning to march and think they can just walk out of countries and take over areas and so on. Now, the whole tactic with the West is that they arm the locals with arms, which is what's happening, and in that arming, it means they can train them a bit too, and they then go and they be the foot soldiers to some degree to try and protect the Western ideology as well as their own civilization in the country that they live in, that the war's breaking out in. And it's interesting, that seems to be the kind of way that we do things in the West when it comes to government and so on, and there'll be intelligence in that will tell the locals what's happening, and that's the way that goes as well, and it's quite common knowledge that they're putting it all over the news now as well, so they're obviously putting that out there for a reason. But this void is starting to get filled again. The void is starting to fill up with this new thing, and we've got to ask ourselves, I personally think this as well, why do we need to be fighting each other all the time? We have so much, like we mentioned before, like the Aztecs built their thing, the Egyptians built their thing, people came together in the hippie movement and beyond. There's subculture of groups, if you like, plastered all over the globe. All have, like, for your skateboarders to Goths to Indians, to the Red Indians, to the cowboys and so on, whatever it may be. But you have subcultures all over the world. You have intellects, you have intellectuals, you have, there's doctors, nurses, whatever it may be. There's so much things here that we're very good at, and there doesn't seem any rationalisation in my mind why we need to keep fighting with things. And it seems to be something that we've been doing for such a long time. And it's come down to, in my mind, the only reason that we fight as much as we do is because of this perception of belief. We believe in something, and then our perception is whatever it is, and we then think we should protect that because we have the old caveman instinct in us with the fight or flight. We have to protect that to maintain the way of life that we know. And that's really what it comes down to. It's to protect the way of life that we know, that makes us rise up and defend the thing that gives us that life, that way of being, that living standard. And this is why you have people in the East, Middle East, rising up and try to provoke some sort of war, and dragging America and dragging France is going to get them arms to, and dragging the UK into it, when they know there's a financial crisis and they know that these countries are possibly a wee bit weaker. You don't want to say they'll be weaker because we don't know, but there is obviously no as strong. They're not as strong as they were before, because they're not as keen to go into a war now as they were before, and I think that's a big sign. And then probably, in some respects, it might be a good thing that they're not going into war and they don't have the money to do it. And they've learnt for the last one where they get dragged in and couldn't hardly get out it, and just get out of the Iraq wars and so on, just the skin of their teeth. So the Aztecs reached up to God. The Egyptians had a belief and reached up to the gods and all the rest of it. The hippies done probably similar. They had a belief and they wanted world peace and God loves you and all this sort of stuff. And now you have some sort of type of holy thing, war happening or march happening with ideology that is absolutely insane, some of it, and some of the atrocities these people are carrying out in ISIS and so on. And you have people of different religions now, like your Iran, you have France, you have America, you have Britain and so on, all coming together and trying to keep some sort of world peace, some world order, no matter what the beliefs are, because they believe, in religion it is, they believe that the peace or the tranquility we have at the moment might not be the best, but it's worth fighting for and worth protecting. And that seems to be their top of the pyramid right now. That seems to be their hippie movement, if you like, their ability to recognise that what we have has developed from all those different eras and all those different people who have died for what we have now. It would be wasted if you didn't protect it, which is why I suppose then there is some sort of like military action against ISIS and getting into Iraq again and doing the thing in such hard times as well, you know, because people are dying there, but people are suffering here as well in the West without wars. And I think to look at the governments, you know, it must be really hard for people like Obama and Cameron and so on to actually make decisions as a sole person overall responsible that, yeah, this is what we're going to do, we're going to go and we're going to fight these people and protect what we have. It must be really, really hard, you know, for them. But they draw upon the wars of the past, and there's so much military there that the wars of the past give you the wars of the present. And I think that's why there's always going to be wars in the future, because it's ingrained in our way of being. It's exactly how we as a species need to reaffirm to ourselves and reinforce to ourselves that things actually are okay and we're able to keep control of our lives or our civilization by protecting it. And it really, for me, if you take the belief as a first perception, then is paranoia a second perception? Because it looks like no matter if it's the East or the West or the Middle East or whatever, there seems to be a level of paranoia that people aren't getting a fair deal and people are going to get other people in some sort of like fight or whatever it is, and then take the other people's stuff off them, if you like, to use that kind of street talk. Take their stuff off them. And when you take their stuff off them, it means that you've won. And it seems to be something that's happened over thousands of years. So I think there is some sort of perennial line there that's perpetuated by some sort of intergenerational genetic type framework. I think taking Carl Jung's collective consciousness, I think you could probably argue that as a good case for what's happening now. And see if you want to be really philosophical and psychological about it, on the political sense as well, you could probably say that it's not us fighting these wars, it's actually past generations and past generations before them. All these collective conscious kind of genetic type structures all coming forward to the present day and forming the belief systems that we have. Hence that would be like a third perception. And I think it's almost like an unconscious perception, where we actually, I'm sure Carl Jung argues that as well, but we actually don't know it exists. It just affects us. And as Freud would say, most of the unconscious mind affects our behaviour, and there's only a certain wee bit of it which is conscious, which is the bit we're aware of, actually we think we're in control of. So there may be some sort of unconscious type dynamics to this kind of war-driven state of nature, as Thomas Hobbes would call it to some degree. You know, this seemed to be something there, and you know, it's quite fascinating and at the same time disturbing that there is a dark side to humanity, as well as a most glorious side. And the most glorious side gives you everything that you have that you can probably see and touch when it comes to infrastructure, creation, the arts. Like the hippie movement was a great creation in itself for its flamboyance and its belief that you could have freedom of speech and it would be heard, and that things don't need to be the way they are. That was a great, great dynamic that to the culture that we have now all over the Western society, and right back to the Aztecs, and you can even go back further than that to the biblical type um, stories that they were told of greatness and magical kind of inspiration that came from that for people to kind of be inspired for generations after that. And you know, you can go back to these great, great things in humanity, but there always seems to be this dark side, this dark thing that creeps through, and it always ends up in this kind of war-driven kind of purpose to protect the thing that you think that is good. So it's interesting. I do hope that these Iraq and America and Britain and all the rest of it, it all de-escalates and it doesn't happen to the magnitude that we saw before in past wars. And I hope the people in Iraq are okay, and all the people around the world that are involved in this thing stay safe. So that was a politics show for today. We'll get another one going obviously soon. And thank you very, very much for listening. And once my computer works a wee bit, I'll press stop. Oh, that's right, and can I step up a wee advert out? Check out TGSFM DJ Awards, which are on the 31st of August. And on the awards, Jamie Hosey, who's the owner of TGSFM, he'll be doing the presentation, as far as I know. I think there were 7 awards, so that'll be quite interesting. So thank you very much for listening, and that's me. So I've been Tommy, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.